I'm 75 years old, and I have not missed a single person. Not one. That's not something a man is supposed to say out loud. I know that. But I've lived long enough to stop caring what I'm supposed to say. The last time I truly wanted to be around people, I was 25. Not the last time I showed up. Not the last time I smiled and nodded and performed the version of myself that made other people comfortable. I mean, the last time I actually wanted to be there. That was 50 years ago. And if you stay with me, I'll tell you exactly what I saw. I wasn't always like this. I want you to understand that first. I grew up in a house full of noise. Brothers, cousins, neighbors who never knocked. Dinner tables where 5 people talked at once and nobody was really listening to anyone. I thought that was just life. I thought that was what it meant to be alive, surrounded, included, part of something. I was good at it too. I could walk into a room and find someone to talk to. I remembered names. I asked questions. People said I was warm, and I believed them for a while because I didn't know what warmth actually was yet. I had friends through school, through my early 20s. The kind of friends you make when proximity does all the work. Same class, same neighborhood, same bar on Friday nights. We laughed. We stayed out too late. We thought we were close. I thought I was happy. But somewhere around 25, something started to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a quiet cracking, like a wall that looks solid until you notice the line running through it. It started with conversations. I began to notice, really notice, how circular they were. You talk to someone and they'd tell you about their life, and then you'd see them 3 weeks later and they'd tell you the same things, the same complaints, the same stories, slightly adjusted, the same anxieties dressed in new clothes. I'd sit across from someone and I could finish their sentences before they got there. And it wasn't because I was smart. It was because nothing was actually moving. The words were moving. The mouths were moving. But underneath, everyone was standing completely still. I started watching people differently. The way they talked about others. Not to understand them, but to feel better by comparison. The way they agreed with things they didn't believe, because agreeing was easier than the silence that came after disagreement. The way they performed versions of themselves based on who was in the room. Not lying exactly, just never quite arriving. Never quite being the thing they were pretending to be. And I started to realize I was doing it too. I was performing. I was maintaining. I was saying things that sounded like the right things to say, and laughing at the right moments, and expressing concern when concern was expected. And none of it was costing me anything, because none of it was actually me. That was the first thing that cracked the wall. I read about Schopenhauer once. Years after I had already pulled back. Years after I had already noticed what I was noticing. And when I found his ideas, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Recognition. He said, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, not a book, that most people don't think. They repeat. They process the same feelings through the same channels and call it living. They reach for the same distractions, the same conversations, the same small dramas, because the will inside them just keeps pulling. not toward anything meaningful, just forward, motion for the sake of motion. He was right about that. I had watched it with my own eyes. He wrote about how people gather together not because they genuinely want each other, but because they can't stand themselves. That the craving for company is, more often than not, a craving for escape. From the interior, from the quiet, from whatever sits in a room when there's no one else there to drown it out. He compared it to porcupines in winter, pressing together for warmth, drawing back from the quills. Never quite comfortable, never quite able to stay apart either. That image stayed with me, because it was exactly what I saw at every dinner table, every party, every friendship stretched past its natural end. People pressing in, not out of love, but out of cold. What bothered me most, what I couldn't name for years, was the performance. Not dishonesty exactly. Something more automatic than that. People becoming slightly different versions of themselves depending on who they were with. Not consciously, not maliciously, just adapting, always adapting, the way a creature adapts to survive. He had a name for that too, more or less. The social self, the mask worn so long it starts to feel like a face. Most people, he believed, never got beneath it. Not because they were shallow, but because going beneath it required a stillness they had never learned to tolerate. Solitude, he thought, was where the real work happened. Not the forced kind, not the lonely kind, the chosen kind, the kind that strips away what other people need you to be and leaves you with what you actually are. I didn't read him and then change my life. I had already changed it. I read him and understood for the first time that what I had seen, someone else had seen too, a long time ago, and that it wasn't bitterness that made him write it. It was clarity. The second thing was energy. I started paying attention to how I felt after social situations, not during you're distracted, engaged, playing the game, but after. After a dinner with friends, I'd come home and feel emptied, not tired the way you feel after real work, tired the way you feel after pretending all evening. There's a difference. One kind of tired comes with a sense of having done something. The other kind just leaks. I'd sit in my apartment on Saturday nights after going out and feel more alone than I had before I left. That confused me for a long time. I thought something was wrong with me. But the more I paid attention, the more I understood. I wasn't drained by people. I was drained by the version of myself I had to become to be around them. I started pulling back slowly. I didn't announce it. I didn't have some conversation about needing space or reaching some kind of clarity. I just started being less available. A call I didn't return. An invitation I quietly declined. A gathering I showed up to late and left early. Then one I didn't show up to at all. People noticed at first. Some asked if I was okay. I told them I was fine, just busy, which was half true. I was filling the time I used to give away with other things. And after a while, the calls got less frequent. The invitations slowed. Some friendships just dissolved the way things dissolve when you stop maintaining them. Like a fire that was always burning barred wood. I expected to feel guilty. I mostly felt relief. What happened in the silence surprised me. I thought I would be bored. I thought I'd crack eventually, that some deep human need for company would rise up and drag me back. But instead, something else happened. My mind got quieter. There's a kind of noise that comes from constant social contact that you don't notice until it stops. A low-level hum of other people's opinions, expectations, moods, running underneath everything, always. And when it went away, I could hear myself think for the first time. I started working differently, longer, deeper. The work I did in those first years of withdrawal was better than anything I'd done before, not because I was more talented, but because I wasn't fragmented anymore. I wasn't half present in my own life. I noticed things I'd never noticed. The way light changed through an afternoon. The particular silence of early morning before a city starts. My own patterns, my own rhythms. When I was sharp, when I was slow, what I actually wanted to read, actually wanted to think about. I had been living someone else's schedule for most of my life, and I hadn't known it. I became more disciplined, not through force, but because there was nothing competing for my attention. When there's no one to call, no obligation to prepare for, no social performance to recover from, you have time. Real time. The kind you can actually do something with. I built things in that silence. Work I'm still proud of. A life that actually looked like me. Here's something I noticed about people during those years. Most of them were terrified of being alone. Not in a way they'd ever say out loud, but you could see it in how they filled every moment with noise, with plans, with the constant presence of others. How an empty evening felt like a threat. How they'd rather have a bad conversation than no conversation. How they'd keep relationships alive long past the point of meaning, just to avoid sitting with themselves. People don't use solitude to rest. They use other people to hide. And most of the time, no one acknowledges this. It gets dressed up in words like connection and community and belonging. But underneath, a lot of it is just avoidance. If you never spend time alone, you never have to meet yourself. And for many people, that meeting is something they've been postponing their entire lives. Most conversations are just noise management. Two people taking turns not listening, filling silence neither of them can tolerate. You walk away having said 100 words and meant almost none of them. I know because I did it for 25 years. Most friendships are built on convenience. Same place, same time, same season of life. And when those overlap, you call it closeness. When they stop overlapping, you drift. And you realize the closeness was never really about the other person. It was about the context. Remove the context, and most of it disappears. That's not a cynical observation. That's just an honest one. I want to say something about loneliness because I know that's what you're thinking about. Yes, there was loneliness. There were winter evenings that pressed down on me. Moments I wanted to call someone and had no one to call, or rather, had chosen slowly to let those lines go quiet. There were times I watched people from a distance, laughing, belonging to each other, and felt something move in me that I couldn't quite name. I'm not going to pretend the silence was always peaceful. Sometimes it was heavy. But here's what I learned about loneliness. There's the loneliness of being alone, and there's the loneliness of being with people who don't see you. I had felt both. The second kind was worse. It has a specific quality to it, a particular ache that comes from sitting in a room full of people and realizing you're completely invisible to every one of them. Not because they don't like you, but because no one is really looking. That loneliness I stopped feeling the moment I stopped showing up. The other kind, the kind that comes from actual solitude that I learned to sit with. Not enjoy at first, just sit with. The way you sit with anything difficult until it becomes familiar, until it stops being frightening. And eventually, it became something else. Not quite peace, but its quieter cousin. I'm 75 now. I have lived most of my life in a deliberate stillness that most people I know would find unbearable. I've gone weeks without a meaningful conversation. I've spent holidays alone, not from circumstance, but from preference. I have watched the world fill itself with noise and speed and the constant anxious maintenance of connection, and I have stood quietly a little to the side of all of it. The things I thought I was missing, most of them weren't what I thought they were. The conversations I thought I needed, I didn't need them. I needed myself. I needed the quiet long enough to figure out who that was. Do I have regrets? I have one. I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I hadn't spent the first 25 years of my life performing, maintaining, being the kind of person other people were comfortable with, instead of the kind of person I actually was. That time doesn't come back. I'm not telling you to do what I did. I'm just telling you what I saw when I finally got quiet enough to look. Most people are waiting for clarity, for certainty, for the right moment to start becoming themselves. And while they wait, they fill the time with other people, with noise, with the comfortable blur of constant company. The years go by, and the quiet they were always running from is still there, waiting, patient as stone. I'm 75 years old, and the most honest thing I've ever done was finally stop pretending that the room had anything left for me.